In 1944, the undisputed king of the battlefield was the German Tiger tank. It was a 60-ton fortress of steel. Its frontal armor was 100 millimeters thick, so tough that Allied tank shells would bounce off it like pebbles. Its 88 millimeters cannon could vaporize a Sherman tank from a mile away. Now, look at this. This is the Piper L-4 Grasshopper. It is made of wood, aluminum tubes, and fabric. Essentially, it is a kite with a lawnmower engine strapped to the front. It had no armor. It had no machine guns. Its top speed was slower than a modern Toyota Corolla on the highway. In a fight between these two, the math is simple. The Tiger is the apex predator. The Grasshopper is the insect. If the pilot of that plane gets too close, a single bullet from a German infantryman could tear through the fabric wing and send him spiraling to his death. But in the autumn of 1944, one American pilot looked at that 60-ton monster and didn't feel fear. He felt annoyed. Hi, I'm Ray. My grandfather served in Patton's Third Army, and he used to tell stories about a mad major who turned the war upside down. His name was Major Charles Carpenter, and he decided that the laws of physics and the regulations of the U.S. Army didn't apply to him. He did something that engineers said was impossible, and commanders said was suicidal. He went to the infantry, stole 6 anti-tank bazookas, and strapped them to the wings of his paper plane with baling wire and duct tape. Then, he went hunting. Today on G.I.Stories, we are taking to the skies in Rosie the Rocketer to tell the insane true story of the only pilot in history who destroyed a heavy panzer division with a glorified flying bicycle. Chapter 1. The Flying Coffin. To understand how crazy Charles Carpenter was, you first have to understand what he was flying. The L-4 Grasshopper was the military version of the famous Piper Cub. It was designed for one thing: observation. These pilots were the eyes of the artillery. They would float over the battlefield at low altitude, spot German positions, and radio the coordinates back to the big guns behind the lines. The plane was incredibly light. It weighed less than 700 pounds. You could literally pick up the tail and drag it around by hand. But this lightness came at a cost. Protection was zero. The skin of the plane was cotton fabric, treated with dope. A standard German Mauser rifle bullet wouldn't just puncture it. It would go through one side and out the other without slowing down. The pilots who flew these machines had a grim nickname for them: Flying Coffins or Maytag Messerschmitts. Their only defense was agility. The plane could fly so slowly, around 40 miles per hour, without stalling that fast. German fighters like the Mi-109 often couldn't shoot them down because they would overshoot the target. It was like a hawk trying to catch a butterfly. But Charles Carpenter wasn't your average butterfly. Before the war, Charlie wasn't a soldier. He was a history teacher and a football coach in Illinois. He molded young men into athletes. He understood aggression. He understood that the best defense is a good offense. When he arrived in France in 1944, shortly after D-Day, he was frustrated. Day after day, he would fly over the hedgerow. He would see German trucks, armored cars, and tanks moving troops to kill American boys. He would grab his radio microphone and scream for artillery support. Fire mission, enemy column at Sector 4. But often, the artillery was busy, or they were out of range, or the radio signal was weak. Carpenter would watch, helpless, as the Nazis escaped into the woods to fight another day. He would land his plane, slam his helmet on the ground, and curse. The football coach in him couldn't stand sitting on the sidelines. He told his mechanic, "I'm tired of watching these guys get away. We need some teeth." Chapter 2. The garage hack. Now, putting a gun on a Piper Cub had been tried before. Some pilots carried a Colt .45 pistol and shot out the window like cowboys. It was useless. But Carpenter didn't want a pistol. He wanted to kill tanks. And to kill a tank in 1944, you needed the U.S. Army's portable anti-tank weapon, the M1 Bazooka. The bazooka fired a 2.36-inch shape-charged rocket. It was designed to be fired from a soldier's shoulder. It had a quick, it had a backblast of fire, and it was notoriously inaccurate beyond 100 yards. Carpenter acquired, probably borrowed without asking, 2 bazookas from an infantry supply depot. He brought them to his plane and called his crew chief. Imagine the conversation. Carpenter, I want to strap these to the wing struts. Mechanic, Major, if you fire those, the backblast will set the fabric wings on fire. You'll burn alive in midair. But Carpenter was a history teacher. He knew history is made by those who take risks. They started the modifications. This was pure GI ingenuity. No engineers, no blueprints, just trial and error. They mounted the bazookas on the wing struts, far enough out so the fire wouldn't hit the cockpit, but close enough to be stable. The firing mechanism was even cruder. They wired the electric triggers of the bazookas into the cockpit and taped a switch onto the dashboard. It was a science fair project fueled by vengeance. They named the plane Rosie the Rocketer, a play on the famous Rosie the Riveter. It sounded cute, but what it could do was terrifying. I have to pause here because this is the kind of story Hollywood would reject for being too unrealistic. A history teacher strapping rockets to a kite with duct tape. Come on. But it's 100% real. If you love these stories of American grit and creativity, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It tells YouTube to share this history with more people. And let me know in the comments. If you were the mechanic, would you have agreed to modify that plane, or would you have reported him to the mental hospital? Okay, let's see if this thing actually flies. Chapter 3. First Blood. The test flight was tense. The extra weight of the bazookas and the rockets made the already slow plane even slower. The aerodynamics were ruined. The plane dragged through the air, but it flew. Now Carpenter needed a target. He spotted a German armored car moving along a road. Usually, this vehicle would be safe from an L-4. The German crew probably looked up, saw the tiny plane, and laughed. They didn't even bother to hide. Carpenter put the plane into a dive. This was the dangerous part. The bazookas were not guided missiles. To hit anything, Carpenter had to aim the entire plane at the target. He had to dive straight at the guns of the enemy. At about 100 yards, he flipped the switch. The recoil shook the fragile wooden frame. Smoke blinded him for a second, but when he looked back, the armored car was smoking. He hadn't destroyed it completely, but the Germans bailed out and ran for their lives. They had never seen an observation plane fight back. Carpenter landed with a huge grin. It worked. The fabric didn't catch fire. The wings didn't fall off, but Carpenter wasn't satisfied. 2 bazookas weren't enough. If he missed, he was defenseless. He told his mechanic, "Put more on. Put as many as she can carry." They upgraded Rosie to carry 6 M1 Bazookas, 3 on each wing. Now, Major Carpenter didn't just have a sting. He had a barrage. He was a flying artillery battery. Chapter 4. The Battle of Arracourt. The real test came in September 1944. During the Battle of Arracourt, this was a massive tank battle. The Germans launched a desperate counterattack with their panzer brigades to stop General Patton's advance. The weather was terrible. Fog and rain grounded the U.S. Air Force. The P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs, the powerful fighter bombers, couldn't fly. The American tanks on the ground were blind and outnumbered. But the L-4 Grasshopper could fly under the weather. Carpenter took off into the mist. He wasn't supposed to engage. He was supposed to spot. But then he saw them. A column of German heavy tanks was flanking the American position. They were invisible to the U.S. forces on the ground. If they attacked, they would slaughter the American infantry. Carpenter radioed for help, but no one could come. He was alone. He looked at his 6 rockets. He looked at the heavy armor of the Panthers. He knew the physics. A bazooka rocket might struggle to penetrate the thick front armor of a tank, but Carpenter knew tanks had a weakness. The armor on top of the turret and the engine deck is thin. Very thin. Maybe only 20 or 30 millimeters. If he could attack from above, at a steep angle, his rockets would cut through the steel like a hot knife through butter. Carpenter initiated a dive that would make a Stuka pilot dizzy. He spiraled down out of the clouds. Silent. As a ghost, the Germans didn't hear him until he was right on top of them. He pulled the trigger. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 rockets slammed into the top of the lead tank. Boom! The ammunition inside the tank ignited. The explosion was massive. The other German tanks panicked. They couldn't elevate their main guns high enough to shoot him. They started firing machine guns wildly into the air. Carpenter pulled up, the J-forces straining the wooden spars of his wings. He circled back. He had 4 rockets left. Dove again. By the time he returned to base to reload, he had disrupted the entire German attack. A history teacher in a canvas plane had stopped a panzer division. Chapter 5. The Legend of the Mad. Major word spread fast. The infantry loved him. The tank crews loved him. They started calling him the Mad Major. But the most interesting reaction came from the Germans. Prisoners captured in that sector told interrogators that they were terrified of the little green planes. They weren't afraid of the P-47s as much, because you could hear a P-47 coming from miles away. But Rosie the Rocketer could appear silently from behind a tree line, fire a rocket into your engine, and disappear before you could rotate your turret. Carpenter's tally began to grow. By the end of the campaign, he was officially credited with destroying 6 German tanks and several armored cars. Think about that stat line. 6 tanks, destroyed by an airplane that cost less than a Jeep. Even General George Patton, a man who believed in heavy armor and brute force, was impressed. When he heard about Carpenter's exploits, he reportedly laughed and said, "That's the kind of fighting I like. He's fighting his own little war." Carpenter didn't get court-martialed for modifying his plane. Instead, he was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry. Conclusion: Major Charles Carpenter survived the war. He went back to being a history teacher. But in 1945, he fell. Hodgkin's disease and passed away relatively young in 1966. For a long time, his story was just a footnote in history books. But recently, his original plane, the real Rosie the Rocketer, was found, restored, and flies again at Arracourt. When we look at World War II, we obsess over the technology. The atomic bomb, the V-2 rocket, the jet engine. But the story of Bazooka Charlie teaches us something different. It teaches us that ingenuity is the ultimate weapon. You can have the biggest, thickest, most powerful tank in the world, built by the best engineers in Germany. But if you run into a frustrated American football coach with some baling wire, 6 stolen bazookas, and a complete lack of fear, you are going to lose. What do you think? Was this bravery or insanity? And would you have the guts to dive a fabric plane onto a Tiger tank? Tell me in the comments below. If you enjoyed this flight, please subscribe to G.I.Stories. We have many more files to declassify. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies.